So we're well and truly balls deep into silly season now. There are smartphone launches happening pretty much every single day, but one of the upcoming launches that has got tech spods like myself particularly hot and bothered is the OnePlus 8T, which will be launching globally on October the 14th. Now I'm definitely still a fan of the OnePlus 8 Pro, which launched 6 months ago, just when 2020 was starting to take a serious downturn. It's not perfect, sure, but it is one of the more impressive flagship smartphones to launch this year, and that's why I've been using it sort of on and off for the last 6 months, certainly comparing it with other flagships to see how they stack up. And unfortunately, the OnePlus 8 Pro has not dropped in price at all over the past half a year. It's still 800 quid for the base model, or 900 quid if you want this green model with the 12 gigs of RAM stuffed inside. But with the 8T basically lingering on the horizon, who knows, we might see some really good deals on the 8 Pro very shortly. So I thought now would be a great time to re-review the OnePlus 8 Pro, go through all the updates that have happened over the last 6 months, what has changed with the overall experience and how it stacks up to the current flagship lineup. So here's my full OnePlus 8 Pro 6-month review, and for more on the latest greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now 6 months ago, this 6.8-inch behemoth seemed excessively huge, but of course smartphones keep expanding in size, and just these past couple of weeks I've reviewed the likes of the Nokia 8.3 and the Poco X3, which are 6.8 and 6.7 inches respectively. So I've got to say, the OnePlus 8 Pro no longer seems like a giant, although it is definitely a proper handful. And that super smooth glass back means that handling it can be a wee bit precarious at times, especially hot stopping when you fumble it as you're walking somewhere in a hurry. I was really hoping that OnePlus would have implemented a dedicated one-handed mode by now, but no dice. You can still drag down that notifications bar from anywhere on screen, but there's no dedicated screen shrinking feature, so using apps one-handed is still a massive pain in the arsehole region. Still, in better news, that slippery back end has at least stayed in good nick over the preceding months, and it only needs the occasional bit of buffing on your pants to get rid of any greasy smudges. But definitely 100% slap a screen protector onto the OnePlus 8 Pro as soon as you get it, because there's none pre-installed on there, and those little nicks and scratches are really starting to top up now. And speaking of the screen, let's shift straight onto that, because it's caused a lot of raised eyebrows since the OnePlus 8 Pro first hit stores. There was lots of online chatter back around sort of April time about a handful of users having green screen issues. Basically, if you had the OnePlus 8 Pro set to 120Hz refresh rate and the brightness was really low and it was a full moon out, then occasionally the blacker elements on the display would have a sort of greeny tint to them. Personally, I could not recreate this problem at all. I had it on 120Hz and I tried the full range of display settings, comfort tone on and off, had the sRGB on, vivid mode, no dice with any of it. So a really weird one overall, but hopefully those users that were having issues have had them rectified in subsequent updates. What I can say though is that the level of display customization on offer here is absolutely unparalleled. Dive into the screen calibration, for instance, you can get that sRGB level on the go, which is really great if you're editing pics on the fly. You can completely mess around with the color temperatures. You've got all manner of eye comfort modes on there, so nice and easy on your peepers. And the phone is more than smart enough to automatically tweak all of those display settings to suit the ambient conditions and whatever you're up to at the time. And I've got to admit, I do get a bit of a kick out of that motion smoothness feature these days, which seems to have improved over the occasional stuttery and buggy effort from launch. It is a love or hate it feature which makes your YouTube or Netflix videos look hyper smooth, just like them Hobbit films from back in the day, and I just happen to love it now that it's not CAC. Now, back when I first reviewed the OnePlus 8 Pro, I did find that those curved edges did hamper usability somewhat. My palm flesh would kind of intrude on the screen and accidentally select things that they shouldn't have done, which is about as much fun as it sounds. Thankfully, OnePlus seems to have actually sorted this issue out in the subsequent updates since launch as well, which means that those curvy bits no longer cause any consternation. Although those slopey edges can occasionally make things a little bit fiddly still, like for instance in Deezer when you're trying to scroll quickly through your albums list. But I tell you what, big shout out to that fingerprint scanner which is built into the whopper of a display. With these in-display fingerprint sensors, I often find I have to end up re-scanning my digits every month or so because they just simply stop recognizing my fingers. They've got a memory of a pissed up goldfish. But I'll tell you what, with OnePlus 8 Pro, I've never once had that problem. It just works in absolute charm, and the face recognition is still super swift as well. As for the software side of things, well, OxygenOS hasn't really changed up that much at all since the OnePlus 8 Pro first landed. You've still got a stock Android vibe there, with greater customization and the likes of the always-on display, making this one of my favourite manufacturer launches. Now, if you're not familiar with OnePlus's OxygenOS and you want a closer look at some of the software bits, then definitely go check out my full OnePlus 8 tips and tricks guide from back in the day. That'll show you everything you need to know. And I gotta say, the overall experience here on the OnePlus 8 Pro is as slick as an oily otter, although it's not quite perfect even after several updates. Just occasionally one of my apps like Google Chrome or something like that will play silly buggers and I'll have to go into the apps list and just flick it away into oblivion, restart it in order to get it working again. These are definitely just weird glitches though, because the performance is right up there with the very best smartphones of 2020, even 6 months on. That Snapdragon 865 chipset, boosted by 12 gigs of RAM in my review model, means that the OnePlus 8 Pro can absolutely piss its way through any app or game you throw at it. I love whipping this thing out and killing the living out of just random people on Call of Duty, although the slopey edges definitely means that games are best played with a controller. That Fanatic mode is still a great way to avoid disturbances when you're gaming as well. It hasn't changed up at all in the past 6 months, but it still does its job perfectly. Unfortunately, it's not quite so good happy fun times as far as the battery life is concerned. Back when I first reviewed the OnePlus 8 Pro, I found I tended to have about 20% battery life left at the end of a fairly hectic day, whereas several months on and several updates on, it actually seems to have degraded somewhat. These days, I seem to just about squeak through a full day on a full charge, although even then it is sometimes by the skin of my arse. That said, that is with the display setting set to 120Hz refresh rate and Quad HD Plus resolution as well. If you bump down from 120Hz to 60Hz, you tend to get a full day a little bit easier. But then of course, what is the point of stumping up all this cash for a super premium smartphone if you're not going to use all of the super premium features? At least that 30-watt wireless charging is still crazy quick with the OnePlus Warp Charge 30 charger. Stick a dead OnePlus 8 Pro on that bugger for half an hour and you'll get 54% charge, while an hour gives you just shy of a full battery. That is of course with the charger in full-on beast mode, where you've actually got fans whirring away on the charger trying to keep the phone cool as it is charging that battery. Not an ideal situation if you're going to be sleeping with your head right next to the charger, but the great news is you can actually schedule when it goes into full-on beast mode, so you can just have it trickle charging instead during the night, so you can have a nice peaceful bit of slumber. And last up, as ever, let's have a shifty at the quad lens rear camera, which 6 months on hasn't really evolved at all, despite most over-the-air updates containing a variety of so-called camera improvements. The only noticeable change is with the infamous Photochromatic lens, which originally produced absolute nightmare fodder like this. However, it was then swiftly discovered that this lens could kind of sort of see through some very, very thin clothing, which led to OnePlus of course retracting support for it. And there's been a heck of a lot of back and forth with it being semi-reinstated and everything, but the upshot is it basically does nothing now, so it's pretty much a waste of space unless you want to mess around with manual patching. Still, the 48 megapixel primary lens is a cracker, serving up bright, sharp, well-defined photos even when contrast is working against you, especially if you shoot using the default 4:1 pixel binning mode. Colours still look slightly more vibrant than in real life, which is an effect that I personally like, but others might not. While the night mode means that you get bright, clear photos in very low light, although the likes of the Pixel 4 phones are still better when it comes to accurate colour capture there. The ultra-wide-angle lens and the telephoto lens do their respective jobs well, and while the 3x optical zoom can't match crazy space zoom rivals, it is more than enough for just everyday shenanigans, although both the ultra-wide-angle and the telephoto lenses produce warmer colours overall when compared with the primary lens for an even less natural finish. I definitely can't complain with the quality of my 4K home movies, with the option to shoot at either 30 or 60 frames per second. Those visuals are sharp and colourful again, the audio comes through nice and clear, and that HDR mode comes in handy when you're shooting on a bright day. Image stabilization is as good as ever, but you can also switch to the other lenses if you fancy a different viewpoint. So right, there's my full thoughts on the OnePlus 8 Pro 6 months after it originally launched and I originally reviewed it. Still really enjoy going back to it, certainly in those tiny little gaps in between review samples coming in of course. Personally, I definitely find it one of the more enjoyable flagships launched in 2020, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to see what comes out of the OnePlus 8T series. But that said, the OnePlus Nord, if you've got it in your area, definitely check that out as well, because it's about half the price and it still offers a really slick bit of performance and pretty much the same software experience. So if you've been using the OnePlus 8 Pro, definitely let me know your own mini review down in the comments below. Please do subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a lovely rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!